Okay, I wanted to talk today about artificial intelligence. It's a subject that has divided the photography community like probably nothing since the invention of Photoshop. And recently there was a sort of storm in a teacup on social media because a fairly well-known photographer appeared to endorse the use of artificial intelligence and fed some of his own photographs through the AI to come out in a variety of different guises. And this did not go down well. And I thought initially that I was going to talk about this particular case, but I've decided against that because I think there is a degree of ambivalence about what was actually meant in the post in question. It's not terribly clear whether he's addressing photographers or whether he is addressing businesses, but the upshot of it was the phrase that so annoyed everybody was it's about time that photographers treated artificial intelligence as a creative partner. Okay, and this produced a hailstorm. Probably not what he intended, but there you go. Anyway, what I wanted to do was to, rather than join in with the lynch mob, what I wanted to get to was why has opinion become so polarised on this subject, and what are the drivers behind that? Because on the face of it, photographers are a pretty technical crowd. Everybody has embraced, well, not everybody, but most people have embraced digital photography without issue. We use AI in terms of noise removal with DxO. We use AI selections with DxO, Adobe, Affinity. We are using AI. So what's the storm actually about? It's about generative AI. It's about the replacing of content with content that the photographer didn't create. What I want to do is I want to talk about the business background, because I think that has a lot to say about the reaction and why it's so extreme. Then I want to talk about the actual AI itself and try to separate the hype from the reality. And I have committed the cardinal sin. I hold my hands up now to this. I have put two of my own photographs through the AI mincer in order to illustrate A, how easy it is, B, how quick it is, and C, where the limits of the AI currently stand. Now, I did in 2022 experiment with DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, a couple of others, and I've got examples from that time. I concluded at the time that AI was not ready. It wasn't good enough to play or present any threat in the photographic arena. So I'm going to show those pictures, and I also wanted to talk about the threat that AI brings. AI is a disruptive technology, and for those of you that are not familiar with the phrase disruptive technology, it refers to a technology that changes everything forever, changes the business models around it. So probably the most disruptive technology in living memory is the internet itself, which has completely changed everything. What I want to do is to talk about Adobe in particular in this instance, because Adobe have hiked their prices by 30% this year. That's a hell of an increase, and the suspicion is that this is being used to underwrite the cost of developing Adobe's own AI, Firefly. And not surprisingly, people are not happy about this. There has been a feeling for well over a year, for a couple of years now, that Adobe are forcing AI down its customers' throats. And I think there's some justification in that. Nobody, as far as I'm aware, has ever asked for AI enhancements to their photographs. And I think where I'm drawing a line here is AI that makes your job of editing easier and quicker. So AI selections, fine. I don't have any problem with those at all. I use them myself, and I would bet that almost every other photographer uses them that uses Lightroom or Photoshop. They seem to me simply to be an extension of Photoshop's existing functionality. I don't have any problem with that. It's useful. However, what I do have a problem with is things like swapping skies. Now, I know that this has been something that certain photographers have been doing for years and years and years. And AI undoubtedly makes that a quicker process. But I think I put this question to an older photographer, even older photographer, recently, and his answer was that this is about truth. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. What we're trying to do as photographers is to portray a truth about the thing that we're taking a photograph of, and that truth could be literal in terms of a literal representation of things that were in front of the camera, nothing added, nothing changed. And I think it's worth pointing out at this time that it was only a few years ago that the winner of a photography competition was basically stripped of his title and disgraced for the cardinal sin of using Photoshop on the image. So where this leaves AI, I'm really not sure. I think we're looking at a parting of the ways. If we accept that we are at this crossroads, we are at this sort of fork in the road, then it also follows that we need to look at how AI is going to disrupt the landscape. Portrait photography, stock photography, product photography, and then there are the traditional career paths, photojournalism, documentary photography, and so on and so forth. So I can see at least 3 or 4 of those avenues drying up completely. Headshots, corporate headshots, I can absolutely see that disappearing. At the moment it's not particularly profitable, but you can charge a decent amount of money for going into a corporation for the day and photographing the headshots. That I'm quite sure will be taken over by AI. Simply take your photograph on your computer, feed it to the AI, get it put in front of a standardized background, adjust the lighting, out will come the finished picture. Product photography, no problem at all. Same thing. Get a decent photograph of the product, feed it into Nano Banana, massage it to your heart's content, and the whole process will cost you very little money. So as a business, I can see that this is the way that things are going to go. Is definitely going to upset the apple cart. I think what is inevitably going to happen is that there will be a perceived differentiation between photographers that produce content, so content creators, and photographers that produce art, for lack of a better word. Now, let me go into that in a little bit more detail. I spent a large part of my professional career shooting products for various companies, and this was both the bread and butter white background shots and also the editorial shots for magazines. I could see all of that work disappearing now. Fortunately, I don't actually need it at this point in my career. I've managed to diversify my income sufficiently to not have to worry if I never take another product photograph again, but that's kind of beside the point. The point I want to make is an extension of the point the elder photographer made about truth in photographs. Now, what I've always maintained about my own photography is it has always been craft-based. I see myself as quite a technical photographer. I broke into the business by specialising in photographing different difficult things like glass, highly reflective surfaces and so on. That separated me pretty much immediately from the people that I'm now calling content creators. And that was really how I managed to get into the business. And from there I moved into flower photography for people like David Austin Roses, employed me to photograph their roses. The first, to give you an idea of how different that is to simply wandering into the garden and taking a picture of a plant. The first commission I got from David Austin Roses, they flew the roses in from Japan the night before, and they were refrigerated and no pressure at all. My point is this. I have always been heavily craft-based, and on this channel I've flown the flag for craft, for intentional photography, for getting to know your equipment and getting to know your editing software, and being able to produce the best photograph that you possibly can. Now, I want to really extend that, because I think that is the second path. The first path is those that are happy to use AI. The second path is craft. Now, I'm going to demonstrate right now just how much craft is involved in AI. So here is a picture that was the output from AI experiments that I did 3 to 4 years ago. You can see that it's atmospheric. But it's no way photorealistic. It never would be mistaken for a photograph. So it was kind of an interesting experiment, but I concluded that there was no way it was going to be useful for photographers anytime soon. This next photograph is a photograph I took locally here in Spain. It's a house on the edge of the Rio del Cal Gorge. It's really a snapshot. So this is untreated. This is simply a raw, straight out of the camera. I asked Nano to make this a winter scene. The prompt was literally, make this a winter scene. And to my horror and surprise, Nano spat out this picture. It took it about 10 seconds. And I think I would be really hard pushed to determine that that was a picture that had been produced by AI. It seems perfectly good to me. I'm sure if I was to blow it up and inspect it with a magnifying glass, I might be able to find flaws, but that looks pretty good. I thought I'd push it a little bit further. So I said, my prompt was, add a small family, 2 adults and a child, walking from left to right near the isolated tree 75% of the way across the photo. And it spat this out, 10 seconds it took. Now, I think that I could make an argument that the figures are slightly too big, so I think the perspective is wrong. But it would simply be one further prompt to reduce the size of those people by 10 to 15%. That's not a problem at all. So the issue here is that AI, in the space of 3 years, has got to a place where it's virtually impossible to tell the difference between a photograph that's been created in AI and a photograph that's been taken by a photographer. So I wanted to see how well the AI could do a rather tricky product shot. Now, the problem we want to solve with this shot is the reflections on the glass and the bottle are slightly too harsh. They should really be more diffused and softer, but that's difficult. So I asked Nano Banana, Google's AI, to, quote, remove the reflections from the bottle of cider and the glass. And what it did was, it removed the entire glass and didn't touch the reflections on the bottle. So fail for Nano Banana, didn't work. But I thought I'd better do due diligence, so I took it to Adobe Photoshop, loaded up the generative AI, selected the glass and said, quote, remove the reflections from the glass. And it did. Too perfectly, really. I mean, very, very effective. Would need a tiny little bit of touching up using Photoshop tools, but nothing extraordinary. Took seconds to do. Might have taken me half an hour to do that myself using the Photoshop tools. So Adobe Firefly can cope with this level of detail, and it's only going to get better. So I think I concluded that this was the writing on the wall for product photography. However, there is another angle here. What we've focused on is technical capability. We've tested to see if AI can produce photographs, in inverted commas, that are as good as those that are produced by a photographer, me. And I think that we can safely say that yes, it can. And I think, to be honest, that that's probably true of 99% of photographers out there. I think if not today, then certainly tomorrow. This is really going to disrupt the industry in a very, very big way indeed. So it got me to thinking of what AI can't do. So if I look at landscape and street photography, what AI can't do is to choose the location. It cannot recognize the decisive moment. So just to sort of pour some more detail into that particular one, if you look at the contact sheets that Magnum made available a few years ago in a book, absolutely fascinating, because you'll see that some of the most famous street photographs in the world were selected from a batch of 40 to 50 single shots. Henri Cartier-Bresson is a good example of this. There's a photograph, a very famous photograph that he made that, when you look at the contact sheets, turns out to be one of a selection of about 50 photographs. So he photographed the location to death, and absolutely was then able to choose a photograph that's been recognized as a masterpiece. In photojournalism, AI is not going to be able to recognize the cultural, political significance of events that are unfolding in front of the lens. That is going to take a human being to do that. So taking just two examples, the guy standing in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square, and the tank grinds to a halt literally inches away from him. Very famous photograph. I can't say that AI would have been able to catch that picture. The other one is the very famous one from the Vietnam War of the girl running down the road in the aftermath of the napalm attack. It's a photograph that has been very widely praised, circulated, and it took a human being to take that photograph, to recognise the moment, recognise the composition was good, and put the finger on the shutter. In portrait photography, let's discuss for a moment sort of the human impact into this. The very best portrait photographers are able to bring a quality out of a pose that represents a truth about the person who's being photographed. So that might be a mood, it might be a sort of a melancholy, a joy, an optimism. Whatever it is, the best portraits are not simply glossy, airbrushed photographs of models. They're photographs of real human beings with real human emotions, and that's why people respond to them. That is something that AI is not going to be able to do. So I think if we look at the bigger picture, there's quite a lot of, whilst we recognise that AI is a disruptive technology, there's quite a lot of reason for optimism, because we can take at least 3 or 4 points that AI simply can't do, and they're all associated with the human element, and human emotions, human creativity, human empathy, etc. So what I think is going to happen, and this is a punt, but I'm going to come back in 12 months' time and let's see if it has happened at all. But my guess is that if we go back to the days of Henry Ford, right, who invented mass production and enabled motor vehicles to become cheap, not disposable exactly, but mass production opened the door for cheap disposable goods to be produced en masse, and the cultural value, or just the value, social value, whatever of these goods, came down. It pulled prices down. What happened in the aftermath of that was that prices for hand-tooled goods, which were recognisably craft-based, began to climb, and the demand for those goods began to climb. So what I'm suggesting here is that in the aftermath of AI, what's going to happen is AI will commodify photography, and we're going to get very sick of seeing these perfect photographs. And to be fair, this process didn't start with AI. This process started with the introduction of relatively cheap, highly spec'd cameras, which made technically good photography accessible to a very large number of people. So it's not all AI's fault. But what I think is going to happen is that people are going to get sick of these pictures, if they're not already. And I think that will increase the demand for pictures that have been made by real photographers, and it's going to make the gap between art photographers, craft-based photographers, and image creators bigger. So the social media influencers will go one way, and I think photographers, fine art photographers, craft-based photographers will go the other way. And I think if you analyse that, I think what we're really saying is technical expertise on its own is not enough. It's an essential stepping stone, but it is not enough. And I think that what we're going to see is a recognition of the human elements, the creativity, the originality, the risk-taking, whatever, that makes a good photograph better than an ordinary photograph. So I think that is going to be something that more people are going to be aware of in the near future. I think there'll be greater recognition of photographers' ability to build relationships with subjects, with people. As I have commented about portrait photography, it's a huge skill, and it's really 9/10 of it are down to the photographer's ability to build that rapport. Perhaps 9/10 is overstating it a bit. There's portrait lighting is insanely difficult to do well, and by the way, it requires exactly the same qualities in order to make that work. So I think the painful bit is going to be for photographers who are dependent on those areas of photography that are about to become disposable. So headshots, pack shots, product photography to a large extent. I think all of that stuff is going to become history as a means of making photography work for a living. Travel photography, to a large extent, I think is going to be replaced by AI. The pictures already exist. I think that as photographers, the entire community needs to deal with AI. You cannot just ignore it. There's no point in the reaction that says, you know, if you use AI in your photographs, you're dead to me. It doesn't make any sense. AI is here to stay, and it's not going to disappear. I think that we all have to deal with it, but we can choose how we deal with it. And my personal reaction to AI is I'm prepared to use AI up to the point of removing noise from my photographs, removing distractive elements from around the edge of my photographs. Those sorts of activities that map onto editing, to normal Photoshop use, I'm perfectly happy with. I think for commercial photographers, if they are asked by their clients to use AI to change elements of a photograph, I think it's do it or die. If you don't do it, somebody else will. And I think I don't have any. I don't think any commercial photographer should be blamed for using AI. There is another argument, which is a much bigger argument, which is the argument about the use of natural resources, the rumoured pollution of water supplies in areas neighbouring the AI generating installations. And I think those are points worth considering, but I think it would be a very brave man who would stake his whole career on saying no to a client wanting to use AI at this point, and I don't think I would blame somebody for doing that. The other point that's worth bearing in mind is that when we first sort of heard about AI, we had this vision that AI would be used for medical analysis, diagnoses, tracing patterns in scans and so on and so forth. There is potential, there's clear potential in AI for absolutely revolutionising medicine. But there's no sign of that happening. AI has been developed by a small number of large corporations helmed by individuals who, I won't name names, but individuals that I feel are too rich, too irresponsible, and too stupid to recognise that there is more to life than making better images for Instagram. So I think there is a moral and ethical view of it, and I think if we look at the continuum here from the irresponsibility attached to the abuse of the environmental resources that we have left, to the utter irresponsibility of the individuals that are inflating this huge billion-dollar business which has yet to show any profit at all, eerily reminiscent of the dot-com boom and bust, then I think, yes, there's an ethical reason not to embrace it. However, as I mentioned, I wouldn't blame any young photographer who's got a long number of years in front of them for falling into line. The pressures to do so are going to be huge, and they're going to get huger. For me, I made up my mind a long time ago that AI is not a craft or an art. It takes seconds to do. It could be done by a fool, quite frankly. I think there is no value attached whatsoever to a picture that is generated by AI. But I'm not interested. I would never use generative AI to alter the substance of any photograph that I take. Now, I will qualify that. I mean, I've said it once already, but just in case there is anyone here who's immediately reaching for the comment button, I'm perfectly happy to use AI to remove noise from my pictures. DxO have built AI into the noise removal routines. I'm perfectly happy to use AI selection tools to make better selections quicker than I can. I don't see any problem with those activities. Where I draw the line is passing off something that has been created by AI. In other words, bringing new content into a picture that substantially changes the meaning of the picture that you've taken. That is where I draw the line, and you will not find me indulging in any kind of activity of that nature. And I think the last thing that I'm going to say on this subject is really a trivial point, but I do feel that everybody is paying for the development of AI, whether we like it or not. It's absorbed into Adobe's extortionate price rise this year. We're all paying for them to develop Firefly, make it better and more effective. And I think that's immoral. I think that if a company wants to develop AI tooling, that's the risk should be on them, not on the customers. And that, I think, points to the problem that we've got with the charge being led by corporations. It's entirely business and money based, and I don't think that's healthy. I think AI potentially is a game-changing technology for the entire human race, not to understate it. And I think it's in the wrong hands. Quite frankly, I don't think that any of these people are fit to have so much responsibility. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Bit of a long video. I hope it's been interesting. Next week we're going to do the colour science video that I've been promising for a couple of weeks. And if you've enjoyed this video, give us a tick down below, subscribe to the channel if you want, that would be fantastic. This is a real live subject, AI and the impact on photography, so your likes will propel this post into the streams of of other users who will be interested in it. So that would be great if you would do that. All right, guys, see you next week. Thanks very much indeed. Bye now.